Christopher Bernard Wilder, also known as the Beauty Queen Killer, was an Australian serial killer who abducted and raped at least 12 young women and girls in the United States in early 1984, torturing some of them and killing at least 8 of them. Wilder's murder spree began on February 26, 1984, in Florida, and continued across the country through Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Nevada, and California, as well as attempted abductions in Washington and New York before he was killed in a shootout with police in New Hampshire on April 13, 1984. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Past Crimes channel, leave a comment after, and don't forget to like the video. Christopher Bernard Wilder was born in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, on March 13, 1945, to a naval officer for the U.S. and an Australian mother. He nearly died at birth and, at the age of 2, nearly drowned in a swimming pool. Wilder raped a 13-year-old girl on January 4, 1963, while accompanied by 2 other young men, both of whom denied involvement in the actual assault. Wilder was sentenced to probation and later claimed to have received electroshock therapy. This therapy may have exacerbated Wilder's violent sexual tendencies. However, journalist Duncan McNabb claims that there is no evidence that Wilder received electroshock therapy and that the story of his near drowning was made up by Wilder himself. Wilder married in 1968, but she left him after only a week. He immigrated to the United States in 1969 and lived in an upscale home in Boynton Beach, Florida, where he was successful in real estate while developing an interest in photography. Wilder faced various sexual misconduct charges from about 1971 to 1975. He eventually raped a young woman he had enticed into his truck by pretending to be a photographer for a modeling contract. This was to become his modus operandi during his subsequent crime spree. Despite multiple convictions, Wilder was never imprisoned for any of these crimes. Wilder was charged with sexual offenses against 2 15-year-old girls he forced to pose naked while visiting his parents in Australia in 1982. His parents posted bail and he was allowed to return to Florida to await trial, but due to court delays, his case was never heard, as the eventual initial hearing date of April 1984 fell after his death. Wilder began a bloody 6-week cross-country crime spree in the United States in early 1984. He left in his wake 8 murder victims, all female. The first attributed to Wilder was the murder of Rosario Gonzalez, who was last seen on February 26, 1984, at the Miami Grand Prix, where she worked as a spokesmodel. Wilder was also in attendance, competing in the IMSA GTU class in a Porsche 911. Miss Florida finalist Elizabeth Kenyon, Wilder's former girlfriend, went missing on March 5. Neither woman's remains were ever discovered. Wilder led Teresa Waite Ferguson, a 21-year-old, away from the Merritt Square Mall in Merritt Island, Florida, on March 18. Ferguson was murdered and her body was discovered on March 23 at Canaveral Groves. Wilder's next victim was 19-year-old Linda Grover of Florida State University, whom he kidnapped on March 20 from the Governor's Square Mall in Tallahassee, Florida, and transported to Bainbridge, Georgia. He assaulted her in the mall parking lot after she declined his offer to photograph her for a modeling agency. Grover's hands were tied, she was wrapped in a blanket, and she was placed in the trunk of Wilder's car. Grover was kidnapped and raped at Glen Oaks Motel. Wilder used a blow dryer and superglue to blind her. He connected her feet with copper wires and passed an electric current through them. He beat her when she tried to flee, but she escaped and locked herself in the bathroom, where she began pounding on the walls. Wilder fled in his car, taking all of Grover's belongings with him. Terry Walden, a 23-year-old wife, mother, and nursing student at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas, was approached by Wilder about modeling on March 21. She turned him down, but 2 days later, on March 23, she ran into him again, and he kidnapped her. Wilder stabbed her to death and disposed of her body in a canal, where her body was discovered on March 26. Wilder fled in Terry's rust-colored 1981 Mercury Cougar after killing her. Wilder kidnapped 21-year-old Suzanne Logan at the Penn Square Mall in Oklahoma City on March 25. Wilder drove her 180 miles north to Newton, Kansas, and then drove to Milford Reservoir, 90 miles northeast of Newton near Junction City, Kansas, where he stabbed her to death and dumped her body under a cedar tree the next morning. On March 29, Wilder kidnapped 18-year-old Cheryl Bonaventura in Grand Junction, Colorado. They were seen together at a Silverton diner, where they told the staff they were on their way to Las Vegas, with a stop in Durango along the way. They were spotted at the Four Corners Monument on March 30th, after which Wilder checked into the Page Boy Motel in Page, Arizona. Wilder shot and stabbed Bonaventura to death near the Kanab River in Utah on March 31st, but her body was not discovered until May 3rd. Michelle Korfman, a 17-year-old aspiring model, vanished from a 17 magazine cover model competition at the Meadows Mall in Las Vegas on April 1st. Wilder was photographed stalking her during the competition. Her body was discovered near a roadside rest stop in Southern California on May 11th and was not identified until mid-June using dental X-rays. Wilder photographed 16-year-old Tina Marie Rizzico near Torrance, California, on April 4th before abducting her and driving her to El Centro, where he assaulted her. Wilder apparently believed Rizzico would be useful in assisting him in obtaining additional victims, so he kept her alive and took her with him as he traveled back east through Prescott, Arizona, Joplin, Missouri, and Chicago, Illinois. Wilder had been on the FBI's list of the top 10 most wanted fugitives since the second week of April. On April 10th, he and Rizzico traveled to Merrillville, Indiana, where she assisted him in the abduction of 16-year-old Donette Wilt from the South Lake Mall. As Rizzico drove to New York, Wilder raped Wilt several times. Wilder took Wilt into the woods near Penn Yen and attempted to suffocate her before stabbing her twice and abandoning her. Wilt was able to wrap a pair of jeans around herself and call for assistance. Charlie Larson, a truck driver, drove her to Soldiers and Sailors Hospital in Penn Yen. Wilder had returned to the spot where he had left her to ensure she was dead. He became terrified when he realized she had fled. Wilt survived and recovered at Soldiers and Sailors Hospital after Dr. John F. Flynn performed life-saving surgery on her. She informed local authorities that Wilder was on his way to Canada. Wilder forced 33-year-old Beth Dodge into his car at the Eastview Mall in Victor, New York, and had Rizzico follow him in Dodge's Pontiac Firebird. Wilder shot Dodge and dumped her body in a gravel pit after a short drive. Rizzico and he then drove the Firebird to Boston's Logan Airport, where he purchased her a ticket to Los Angeles. Wilder then proceeded north, and in Beverly, Massachusetts, he attempted but failed to abduct a woman at gunpoint. Wilder stopped at Vic's Getty service station in Colebrook, New Hampshire, on April 13th to ask for directions to Canada. Leo Jellison and Wayne Fortier, two New Hampshire state troopers, approached Wilder, who retreated to his car to arm himself with a Colt Python .357 Magnum. Jellison was able to grab Wilder from behind, and 2 shots were fired during the scuffle. The first bullet struck Wilder, passing through his back and into Jellison. Wilder was hit in the chest by the second bullet and died. Jellison was seriously injured but recovered and returned to full duty. Wilder was cremated in Florida and left a personal estate valued at more than $7 million. In June 1986, a court-appointed arbitrator ruled that the after-tax balance should be divided among his victims' families.